are all these are all links to where I received the information from. Again, I'm not someone with a bunch of initials after my name. I am just a mom. This was designed by parents, and every time I give this presentation, I get feedback from those of you who are attending as to what information, additional information I have, or what information might be incorrect. So don't be afraid to write down in that comment section, hey, Kim, I'm questioning this. So here we are. These are the six sections that I am going to talk about. You will notice over here in the left-hand corner, I have a page number. And yes, I have 47 pages. And for any of you who received the PDF of this, you're probably thinking, holy smokes, is she going to talk for 3 hours? No, I am not. What this is, I am trying to give you a guide, some things to think about, things that you need to possibly do in the future. You will do all this at your own pace. I'm not going to read every slide. I'm not going to go into detail on a lot of these slides. I am trying to provide you with information that you can print this off and look at it and decide what you want to work on. So let's get started on the appointee. Okay, this is my number one thing. You absolutely have to do this. I don't care if you are only 40 years old and you're listening to this. You have got to have a plan in your will. Who is going to be responsible for your child with a disability? When I traveled across the state, I would talk to people in their late 70s and 80s where Johnny and Susie were still living at home. They always said, well, we're going to outlive them, and Johnny and Susie don't need to move. I know for a fact that many of the parent resource advisors here at MMI get phone calls. I know the ARC of Nebraska gets phone calls from siblings going, Mom and Dad died, and we have no idea what is going on. If you get anything out of me speaking tonight, this is something you have to do now. So, who do you have? Do you have siblings, nephew, niece, family, friend, service provider? That's your decision. But the one thing that I will tell you, you must do, you must discuss it with all of your children. After my divorce 13 years ago, I sat down with my oldest son, Kyle, his wife, Sam, my daughter, Kristen, who was single at the time, Justin, and I. And we talked about how everything was going to work out. We decided as a family that Kristen would be Justin's guardian and Kyle would be the boots on the ground. So it has to be a family decision. Kristen went off to Seattle for grad school, of course, met a guy and isn't moving back. But you know what? She is already attending Justin's ISP meetings from Seattle, technology and Zoom. The guardian, the power of attorney, whoever you have, does not have to live in the same city. I also just want to tell you that the Office of Public Guardian is not an option. They have a waiting list of many individuals. Unless your child is more than likely homeless, sitting on a corner with a sign around their neck, and I'm being very blunt on this, you probably are not going to get a guardianship through the Office of Public Guardian. The other thing I just want to share with you, it is very important to share with your other children what you are comfortable with. Because I am a single parent, my children and their spouses have read my will. They've read my special needs trust. They have proofread everything. As my daughter Kristen has told many people, Justin's special needs trust is funded first, and then if there's anything left over, her and Kyle will split it, because I gave Kyle and Kristen their college education. They're going to be taking care of Justin, but I do not want him to be a financial burden on them. I just took this page from the Nebraska Guardian Conservator education course. This right here, if you can see, the supported decision making, this is the best. This is what everyone recommends, where it would involve the ward. Justin was involved. He was happy. He just wanted to be with both his sister and his brother. There are other models here of decision making on who makes this decision. But if all possible, include your adult with disabilities in this decision, who they want in the future in their lives. Okay, I went the wrong direction. Just so you know, on all of these items I have listed here, my daughter, Kristen, is already listed as a representative or interested party on all of these things. In all of these areas, her name, her email, and her phone number are listed on this. She, like I said, she attends ISP meetings. I want to just talk about one thing down here on the doctors. Make sure that you have added your appointee. Oh my golly, there's a mistake. I wrote appointee to the authorized people who can get medical information on your child. Because wonder if you are in an accident or something, you pass away, your adult child with a disability is in the hospital. They need access to the information immediately without having to go to court and figure all of this out. So these are all the things that my daughter is already listed on. So this is kind of the end of section 1, the appointee. Again, I don't care who you pick. You just have to make sure that they know. I worked with 2 separate families who just had 2 children. They both told me that their typical adult child would never be the guardian or power of attorney for their child with disabilities. And I asked him, I said, well, who do you have? Well, we've got a niece in St. Louis. The other one was a niece in Colorado. And I said, have you talked to them? And they're like, no. Again, don't do that. I have been to so many funerals, some of them very close, family members. That's just something you cannot do. So if anyone has any questions on section 1 about appointee, could you please put that in the Q&A section for Jennifer to ask me? I'll just wait a minute or two here.
Currently, the only questions that we had was, again, if I could send out the PDF following the presentation, and I will do that, as well as send out the link to the Munroe-Meyer Institute's YouTube page, where this presentation will be posted, as well as past presentations are.
And I just want to go back to this page. So again, when you see these underlines, these are all hyperlinks to documents. And you're going to see these throughout my presentation. So when you get that PDF copy on your cell phone, iPad, your computer, you can click on that and it will take you to the PDF copy of the information I'm trying to provide. Okay, number 2, paperwork. As if all of you don't have to do enough paperwork for Social Security, reporting wages, for representative payee reports, for guardianship papers, for Medicaid renewal, I am probably going to add to your paperwork load by asking you to make sure that you have information documented someplace for whoever your appointee is. This is something that my daughter asked me for. She asked me for a calendar of when certain documents are due. like I said, Justin's been kicked off Nebraska Medicaid 3 times, and I've won every time. She wanted to make sure she knew which month his Nebraska Medicaid renewal came through so that she would be looking for that piece of paper. Two of the things that I think are very important are both the Medicaid renewal, because always remember, if you lose Medicaid, you're losing, it's twofold. Okay, everyone, it's twofold. You're losing Medicaid, the health insurance, but you are losing Medicaid, the home and community-based waivers. And I'll be honest, I cannot lose the home and community-based waivers for my son. I would not have been able to work the 10 years at Munroe-Meyer if I didn't have the home and community-based waivers. And I need those waivers for when I have passed away. The other thing is the earnings reporting every month to Social Security. And I will talk at length about that later on, and some of the things that you need to be aware of and things that you have to do. So the other thing is you can also consider, putting these, sharing these documents on Google Docs. I can't even talk here. Or I believe Microsoft's thing is Teams. The other thing, and I'm going to turn around here, you're seeing this picture of a spiral notebook. It's a 50-cent spiral notebook from Target or Walmart right now. I don't care where you write this down. You can write it down in a spiral notebook. I use a lot of three-ring binders. And this one says Justin's information, do not destroy. I've also labeled it on the side of the binder, do not destroy, always keep this information. I do use a lot of sheet protectors. Sorry, my mind just went blank when I am recording documents. But I also use like an accordion file folder where I have different files inside. I like to use different colors, so I have different colors of file folders in an accordion file. You can use whatever you want. I am going to be meeting with a parent who wants to come over and see my filing system, but it's whatever you're comfortable with. I do have some documents on Google Docs that I can change all the time for my children. So again, this is just a calendar of when items are due. So the next thing are items to keep in a safe place. I'm going to start off with school documents. It is, I learned, incredibly important, and no one told me this, to keep for sure your final IEP when your child graduates from transition at 21, and their last MDT, multidisciplinary team report, which is usually those wonderful reports that tell us how low our child's intelligence is. Why? I help a lot of parents. I was working with a sister who had to move her brother in the mid-40s with Down syndrome, and her 2 elderly parents up to Omaha to take care of him. Her parents had everything all set up, the special needs trust. She always knew she was going to be the provider for her brother, etc. When she went to apply for Nebraska Medicaid, one of the things for Nebraska Medicaid for the developmental disability is that it had to have manifested before age 22. So, brother has Down syndrome. He's mid-40s. We all know that Down syndrome is a chromosome disorder and that almost everyone has an intellectual disability. But the state DHHS was requiring something from the school that he had received special education services to prove it manifested before age 22. This is one of the things that I am telling the whole world about now. I don't see the school districts telling this, so anyone listening on this call, I would encourage you to tell your friends to keep at least some of this documentation. The other reason why, you're going to be dead. I mean, right now, my goal is that Justin would stay in the state of Washington and Kristen would just take care of him from wherever she lives. But I don't know what she's going to have to do. She might have to move him to another state. And even with something with Down syndrome, you have to show that it manifested before age 22. Doctor's records, school records are very important. Social Security documents. These are some suggestions. Reporting of wages. I have to talk about this. Hopefully you can see this almost 2.5 inches of paper. In March of 2022, I received this letter from Social Security. It says, "We are writing to you because we need to know more about your work," talking about Justin. "Please tell us about your work since April of 2012. This is March of 2022. "We will use this information to decide if you can receive or continue to receive disability benefits." My son and my son-in-law argued with me that they could only go back 7 years. I said, that is the IRS. This is not Social Security. My children could not believe. They said, "Probably, Mom, you are the only person that would have kept every paycheck stub from..." Justin started working when he was 16 and he's 35 years old. My kids all laughed at me because none of them, everything's direct deposit anymore. I have to go online to print off Justin's paycheck stub. Nobody keeps paycheck stubs. This is not a common audit, but I do know of 3 other people who have had to go through this audit. It's very painful. I will tell you later why I think they were auditing me, because I had been reporting his wages, and Justin never made more than $6,000 in 1 year. And this was over a 10-year time period. And anyone who knows me knows I can be a little mouthy. I'm just like, don't we have Jeff Bezos or somebody else to go after, somebody who's making a lot more money? You're going to come after my son, and he's never made more than $6,000 in 1 year. But it happened to me. Now, what would have happened if I would not have had all these? I truly do not know. The second sentence scared me because it said, "We will use this information to decide if you can receive or continue to receive disability benefits." I knew I had the information. I did not want to fight with Social Security. I have friends who fought over another issue with their child with Social Security. They had reported his wages all the time. He ended up making too much money. Long story short, the parents had to, with penalties and interest, they had to repay, I think it was approximately $17,000. My concern was I knew I had the paycheck stubs and I wasn't going to have to hire a lawyer to fight Social Security. So this question here, how long? I truly have no idea. I have never been able to find anything on Social Security's website. I can't get an answer to that. So I will leave that up to you. Tax returns at 7 years. Any original papers and medical diagnosis, especially for anyone who's listening where maybe your child is on the spectrum or has an unusual diagnosis. You are going to want to keep those papers in some sort of permanent place, a safety deposit box or some sort of safe in your own home, because you know what? We do have tornadoes and fires and everything else here in Nebraska, and you don't want to lose that information. I'm going to just add this. I'm hoping that everyone on this chat knows about how everything is in upheaval on the developmental disability side for waivers. Initially, what has been told to us is that the comprehensive waiver, the Cadillac, the one that gives residential services, is no longer going to be given in the future. There's a lot of things going on. There is going to be a new program to evaluate our young adults as to the level of services that they need. I highly encourage everyone, these three things right here. What is your child's individual budget amount? What was their last ICAP score? And what is the funding level? Service coordinators are required to give you that information. If they do not give you that information, give me a call. I'll give you a phone number of someone higher up the food chain at DHHS. You need to get that information because there is going to be a new evaluation, and I just think it's important information to receive. I have also, here are links to the PowerPoint from Tony Green. He had a listening session across the state. And then here at the bottom is a page of where to go for updates. I will tell you who is really all over this is the ARC of Nebraska. I would suggest liking them on Facebook, or you can go on their website and get added to their mailing list. Edison McDonald is doing a good job of keeping parents informed of what is going on. So again, these three information, the IBA, the ICAP score, and the funding level. This is something that you need to do for now. And parents, siblings on this phone call, this is really going to be a lot of changes. I hope that everything turns out as they are promising, but I've also lived in this state for 35 years and have seen some things not come through like what they said. But that is some additional information that you should need. Oh, and I think fiddlesticks. I thought I had brought everything downstairs. Doctor's information, you need to have this written down someplace. What I suggest to parents and what I have done every time I go to the doctor for myself, since I'm a single parent, and for Justin, I get the business card and I staple it on a 8.5 by 11 piece of paper, and I write on there, this is Justin's dentist, this is Justin's pulmonologist, this is Kim's pulmonologist. That is one of the easiest ways to collect all of your doctor's information. The other thing I would suggest to you as a parent, for whoever is listening, does your spouse or significant other know all the doctors and medicine that your adult child takes? And if they don't, you need to update them. And I also encourage all of you to do that for yourselves too, to write that information down, not only for your adult child, but for you and your spouse or significant other. And like I said, here's an example of a 3-ring notebook, but I have found the business cards are just a very easy way to collect this information. You don't have to type it up, put it in a 3-ring notebook that is labeled Justin Bainbridge's medical information. This is some other information that has been recommended by people who have listened, of information that you need to provide for your adult child. So that listing is there. If any of you have anything to add, additional information you are not seeing that you think should be written down in case you're in a car accident tomorrow, please either put it in the chat or at the end is my email address. I would really like to know that. Okay. This entire slide was recommended by a parent the very first time I gave this presentation because they had just went through with a very close family member. It was not her child, with her adult child. I believe it was either a sibling or a parent on end-of-life care. I went through this the entire month of February with my sister. My brother-in-law was up at Mayo for a somewhat routine heart procedure. Everything went very well. They were within 2 hours of being dismissed to go back home. and he had a blood clot and had a massive stroke. I sat and watched my sister after a couple weeks, we tried rehab, of having to make the extremely painful decision that they were not going to do any sort of tube feeding or anything like that, or incubation. I cannot tell you that was one of the hardest weeks of my entire life, seeing the pain of my sister and her two children, of what they had to go through. Please take the time to let your children, or whoever is responsible, the appointee, which many times is one of your other children, know what you want for your adult, your young adult, and let them know what you want for yourself. Because after that, I went through with Kyle and Kristen again what my wishes were on all of this. I've also given several links here that talk about kind ethics. And I will tell you this, on National Down Syndrome Society, End of Life and Down Syndrome, this is an excellent article. Don't worry about if you don't have a child with Down syndrome. It has a lot of resources that relate to all disabilities. I have just found that the Down syndrome community, since it's been around so much longer, has a lot of resources. So again, talk about this. Oh, now we're at the really fun part. These are questions, things you should ask. Last Saturday, my ex-husband, was his funeral. He passed away with no will and no instructions. And I have watched my oldest son and my youngest daughter, all the extra time and effort and emotion and everything else, trying to figure out what their dad would have wanted. They did their best job. They did a fabulous job. But it took so much effort to figure out all these things I have questioned, I have written down. I have used this at all of my presentations. I had a couple call me up later to tell me that they decided they went to a mortuary, pre-prayed for their funeral and for their son's funeral. They decided they were all going to be cremated, and there was a place at the church they attended where their cremated remains could go. And the father told me, he goes, "Kim, this was so incredibly hard to do." But he said, "I'm actually relieved that we have all of this taken care of." I have pre-planned my funeral for Justin and I. I have purchased the cemetery plot. And I will tell you, I felt a lot of freedom by just having that all done. I want this done for my children. I've written my obituary. I've written Justin's obituary. I have planned our funeral service. Every individual and family has different cultural ideas on what death is and what is done. So please do whatever your family and whatever is traditional or cultural for your family to do. So again, some items to think about and to decide. Then my daughter Kristen said to me, she's taking this responsibility very significantly. She goes, "Mom, who do I call when you die? Who do I have to notify?" Again, here is a listing of people that I have written down of who she should notify. And I can tell you, I thought of something today. I just have a sheet of paper that just lists all the information on this screen that you can see. I didn't include any phone numbers for, so or names. So I need to go back and redo that name and put their names, the name of, like, the Kristen does have the service coordinator. I think she knows who my lawyer is, but to just have all that information for them, for her to contact. And just so you know, if there's a change or anything, you have to appoint. You have to tell your county judge if you have guardianship. Letter of intent. It's not a legal document, but it is something that you can do. I have a letter of intent written down. So what do I have in these are some general areas. Some of the things that I have in there is that it is very important for me for Justin to be dressed appropriately for his age. He is shorter and stockier, like many individuals with Down syndrome, and so all of his pants have to be hemmed. My children are under strict orders that they are never to have him wear rolled up blue jeans. Okay, they are to get them. I don't care if it costs more to alter his clothes than the cost of the clothes. I want his clothes to fit him. Some other things you can put in there if you're, let's face it, all of our adults have idiosyncrasies. I can tell you that Justin hates flies. If he sees a fly, he will run away from it. If you were in a group with him, he would run away from it. And if there is a fly in a porta potty, he will freak out. He also hates fireworks. Those are some examples of things that you can include. If you just Google letter of intents, there's many examples out where you can include information. I do have some resources at the end. We've talked about a lot of these things: medical care, final arrangements, religious environment. Those are all things that you can do with a letter of intent. And here is some information that you can click on. There are different toolkits. This is from the National Down Syndrome Congress that I have here. This is for the adult sibling toolkit. There's information in here, but there is also, like, if I can get this turned around here, but here is a medication schedule. So there are resources out there to help you. Under the ARC Future Planning, that is all an online planning service that you can do where your appointee or other children can access the information that you want. And if you go to Amazon, there is a whole listing of books titled I'm Dead, Now What? They are mainly for probably typical people, but I have a very good friend who that is what she uses for her adult son, is a book called I'm Dead, Now What? There's one for her son, and there is one for her and her husband. So this ends kind of the long section about paperwork and things that you should be aware of. So again, do we have any questions about paperwork? And if you have written down, it does help me if you know which screen I talked about that. So yes, Jen, do we have any questions?
So far, the only question that has come in it was actually over the appointee section and asking if you have Kristen, who is your appointee, listed with Social Security already.
Yes, I do. Yeah, there is a place on the Social Security. I'm going to talk about Social Security. And there's like a my profile on Social Security, and she is listed there. And I'm also going to talk about how I have already went to court later, and she is a standby guardian. So the instant I am incapacitated or dead, that is all taken care of with the court. So Kristen is listed as a person. So she's still going to have to contact Social Security and get everything changed over. She'll probably have to also provide her, her court-approved guardianship, but she has a standby guardianship that she can use. Let's say both Justin and I are in a car accident, I'm in a coma. She can immediately come in with that standby guardianship and make decisions on Justin's care and treatment. So I hope that answers that question. But yes, It's under the Social Security My Profile, and I have the link coming up.
Okay, and one more question.
Yes.
At what age or what period of time did you start getting all of these records together? Or did you start really getting organized and knowing that this was going to have to be something that you just built into your routine?
Okay, when I really started was when I went through my divorce. I was 55 years old then. And before then, my ex and I had, we had a will. We had my sister and brother-in-law were going to be taking care of our kids. And we had in our will that my sister would be his guardian until either Kyle or Kristen were, comfortable with being his guardian. So we had really only talked about guardianship. That was all. But when I became divorced, I was immediately a single parent. And um, you know, I started, I redid my will, my special needs trust, but it has only been in probably once I turned 65 and started getting Medicare that I really started thinking about this. And after I left MMI, because um, this is I don't want people who are, like I said, in their 40s with a child in their 20s to really get all worked up about this. It is important to have designated, who would be the guardian of your adult child and some of the other things. But I worked with so many older parents who had just done nothing, absolutely nothing. And that's when I really started thinking about all this. And then I started getting phone calls. I average on a week right now, just by word of mouth, 3 families a week reaching out to me for help. And they're all older parents. They're people 65 and older who are fighting Medicaid, especially Medicaid. And I'll talk about why they're fighting Medicaid later. But it wasn't until I was 65. And, Justin, 3 years ago, so Justin would have been 32. But a lot of the planning of who was going to take care of Justin, I did immediately when I was 55. Once I became a single parent and my ex was not involved and I knew he was not going to be any help, I knew I had to have it lined up who the appointee was. And I'm going to be honest. Like I said, my daughter went out for grad school, meets this guy out there. And, sometimes how parents have the sex talk. Well, I had the Down syndrome talk with Kristen's boyfriend at that time because I was blunt with him. I said, you do realize when you marry Kristen, you are also marrying Justin. That we as a family, and Kristen has agreed that she is going to be his guardian. You guys are never going to move back to Nebraska. But Kristen, you might be having to watch your children while she flies to Nebraska a couple times a year to take care of Justin. So I had the Justin talk with my future son-in-law. My daughter-in-law, her and my son had known each other since 7th grade and been dating since she was 16. She already knew that Justin was part of the deal when she married Kyle. But I had the talk with my son-in-law that, hey, this is some additional responsibility you're going to have. So, Jen, do you think that answers the question?
It does. Yes. Thank you.
Okay. The next section, finances. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail on this. There's just a couple things I do want to point out because every time I do this presentation, I find at least one parent that does not know some information. So, finances. Again, here is a link about ABLE accounts versus special needs trust versus pooled trust. I find this very interesting to help you realize what you want to do. But this right here, number 2, Nebraska Medicaid can no longer recapture or claw back an ABLE account when the individual passes. This was an additional state law that was passed back in 2020 in the midst of COVID. And I am amazed how many people still do not do this, because many people would not put any money into an ABLE account because of the clawback by Nebraska Medicaid. Just to go over things again, you can have up to $100,000 total before SSI resources are suspended. So you won't get your Social Security, but they cannot suspend you from Nebraska Medicaid. And I think it's $350,000. Did you know you could have, it's at least $350,000 that you can have in an ABLE account in Nebraska. Always remember that ABLE is the federal law that allowed this. It needed to be a federal legislation. Enable is the name of Nebraska's plan. Over in Iowa, it's called iAble. Not every state has a plan. Some go with other states. In Nebraska, if you have an Enable plan, you do get a small reduction on your state taxes. And if you go to some of these resources down here, they can show you all of the ABLE accounts across. You can have an ABLE account in the state of California and live in Nebraska. You can have it in any state. And $18,000 is the maximum contribution, with the exception of earned income. So for example, if I had $18,000, I could put that in Justin's ABLE account, and then I could have his entire paycheck also put into his ABLE account if I wanted, or a portion of it. So again, just some resources about the ABLE accounts. This page alone, what I'm giving you right here, is a whole 2-hour presentation by itself, 1.5 to 2 hours. So if you have questions about that, I encourage you, you can go on the Enable website. Stacy Pfeiffer is the person responsible for this. She helps parents set up an account. She gives talks. She can tell you when the next talk she is doing. So again, this is a whole separate information. I am only including this because I learned this when I listened to one of Stacy Pfeiffer's presentation via Zoom. There was herself and a lawyer that were talking about special needs trusts. And this was the question: what happens to the money in my child's Enable account when they die if it's not clawed back, if it's not reimbursed back to Medicaid? And Molly Blazek, who is a lawyer that works does a lot of special needs trusts, talked about how in 2024, the Nebraska Small Estate Affidavit increased to $100,000. So basically, the state of Nebraska doesn't care in a way anymore about estates that are below $100,000 in total. Well, let's face it, our kids don't have any assets because they can only have $2,000 plus their Enable account. This is literally like this Form CC-40. It's like a one-page form that you just have to file at your county courthouse. And then whoever was the guardian or the appointee would distribute the money. So this is something, I just bring this up, that if you have a lawyer, you can ask them what happens to the Enable funds when your young adult would pass away, not when you pass away, but your young adult pass away, and ask them about this small estate affidavit. My goal, again, in all of this, I am just trying to make you aware of things. I'm trying to empower you to make good decisions, because you know what? We all got to finish strong. I'm kind of tired. I'm 68. I'm kind of tired of going up and down Dodge Street, taking Justin to Kids on the Block and Special Olympic swimming, but I still do it. But I know I have to finish strong for Kyle and for Kristen and their spouses, of getting all of this lined up for them. This is pooled versus special needs trust. Again, I can tell you, depending on what you might be leaving for let's say that you think your adult child with a disability is only going to receive like $50,000. Molly Blasek really recommended that you go the route of Enable first because the fees are like $12.50 a quarter. The fees are very small. I put on here that a cost of a special needs trust would be $2,500 and up. In Omaha, I think you're going to pay about $4,000, to develop a special needs trust. Make sure that you go to someone who knows what they're doing. Don't have a real estate lawyer do this. It has to be someone who knows what they're doing. And that's all I'm really going to talk about for finances. I think the key is you have to have a plan. And even if your child is younger, you still need a special needs trust. Jeff and I had a special needs trust from pretty much once Justin was born in 1989 because it was beat into our heads that he could not have more than $2,000. And the ABLE accounts did not exist. The only way you could get around the $2,000 limit is you had to go out and buy frivolous and stupid things to get them down below the $2,000. You could not save the money. So the thing is, you have to do something. Either, and it could be, I know I have spoken to parents who the individual Social Security number, they don't ever have to worry about going over the $2,000 limit because their child needs that money every month and they have no concerns. But if you have concerns, if you want to leave any money to your child, you are going to need either an ABLE account started in some state, or you are going to need a special needs trust. I do want to just bring up, most experts, most lawyers would advise you do not leave the portion for your adult child with disabilities to another sibling. So let's say you have two children, Johnny and Susie. Johnny has Down syndrome. You leave all of your money to Susie, and Susie is supposed to use that money then to take care of Johnny. Well, what happens if Susie's in a car accident or something and it's her fault or something happens and she loses all that money? Wonder if she puts it in the wrong investment and loses all her money. That's not the way to go. It's not recommended. I know of parents that do that. It's your decision. But that's just something to think about. If you are doing that, just think about, is that really what you want? So, Jen, are there any questions on finances? Because this is very brief because you need to talk to a lawyer about this.
No questions, but I did just want to let everybody know that the Nebraska Family Caregiver Support Network, it does a virtual learning series, and their series topic in October is over the Enable account. So I will be sending out information in that follow-up email on this recording tomorrow on that, how you can get signed up for that and learn more about the Enable account as Kim was talking about.
Yeah, because it's a whole hour-and-a-half presentation. So I just want to make sure that people are aware of it and aware that the clawback procedure of clawing back the money to Nebraska Medicaid is no longer there. Okay, now we move on to the section where I get the most questions. Social Security, maximizing Social Security. I have probably worked with, I don't know, could be pushing 10 families whose adult child, was getting the incorrect Social Security. And so this is very important. You need to make sure that your child is getting what they are entitled to. And this is what I talked about, this ssa.gov My Account. This is where information, I have an account for myself. And because I am Justin's representative payee, all of his, when I sign into this account, it says, do you want your representative payee person, Justin Bainbridge, or do you want Kim Bainbridge? And I can click on whichever one I want. I highly recommend, if you haven't set up one of these accounts for both yourself and your son or your child, adult child, you need to do that. Yeah, because you want to make sure that your Social Security earnings are reported correctly. And I did find a mistake one time, and I had to get it corrected. So I have been following this since, well, clear back in probably my 30s when I was working. So here is the link. You're going to have to go through and set some information up. There's a lot of security on it, but it is something important to do. So let's just talk about Social Security, just an overview. Retirement, that's what almost all of us are on. Thank all of you who are still working for paying for my Social Security money, okay, because I'm on Social Security. Funded through payroll taxes, I did pay in. Disability, which is SSDI, is funded through payroll taxes. Survivors is when one of the parents passes away. It is usually for the children who are under the age of, I believe, 18, possibly 22, and for that spouse to get survivor's benefits. And then there's the one that we all know about, Supplemental Security Income, SSI. This is funded by general revenues. This is the one always in the news. It's an entitlement. It gets a bad name. Everyone says they want to cut SSI because there's people who are just grifters, grifters. Oh, I can't even talk here. Of taking money from other people. They're cheating the system. But you know what? Our kids aren't cheating the system. Does it happen occasionally? Yes. But there is cheating on everything in this world. So this is the one, SSI, which is in the news, that they are always trying to cut the funding. This is something that is very important, and all of you should take note of on anything and contact our representatives from Nebraska on this and how important SSI is. So let's just talk briefly about SSI. We know you get it at 18. You have this wonderful asset limit of $2,000, which was set in 1984, which was 40 years ago. Yes, 40 years ago. There is there's a bill in both the House and the Senate that is supported by Democrats and Republicans. But of course, this is an election year and nothing controversial is going to go through. All the disability advocates, the ARC, all the Down syndrome groups, all the autism groups, all the cerebral palsy groups, anyone in the disability community is trying to get this raised up to $10,000. And then thereafter would go up every year based upon the Consumer Price Index. So yeah, 40 years, this hasn't been changed. Currently, it's $9.43 a month, but it is reduced if you work by earned and unearned income. And I'm going to talk a little bit later about substantial gainful activity, but it is $1,550. If your adult child makes more money than that, they are at risk of being completely kicked off of Social Security. And again, I have listed a guidebook. This direct link will go there, or you just Google SSA 0510026. So that's the most common kind. Now, the second type of Social Security our young adults could receive is SSDI, which is Social Security, Disability Insurance, SSI, and Medicare. So most of Justin's friends have qualified for SSDI because they have worked ever since they were 21 or earlier. This, you can get 4 credits a year. This is all the information that explains all this. So the individual actually receives a combo SSI, SSDI payment each month. Now this word combo, SSI, SSDI, is my name for it because I can't find an official name for it. However, paycheck earnings still must be reported every month, and Social Security is decreased every month. So that $943 is decreased every month. But the beauty of earning this is that Medicare is received after 2 years of being on SSDI and on this like combo. And you're going, well, what's the big deal about Medicare? Well, there's several things. First of all, if you see any sort of specialists, many times they will not take Medicaid in any state, specifically Nebraska Medicaid, because sometimes it only pays 30 cents on the dollar. So many times specialists will not take Medicaid. Almost all specialists take Medicare. I have been out in Seattle with Justin visiting his sister. We've had to go to the emergency room. We've had to do other things. And Nebraska Medicaid does not cover any bills out in Washington, but Medicare covers Justin's bills. The other thing is, when I was working at MMI, I had Justin on my UNMC insurance, which was primary, and then Nebraska Medicaid was secondary. However, when I retired, I no longer had that group health insurance. But because Justin was already on Medicare, Medicare was primary insurance and Nebraska Medicaid was secondary. And I can tell you that Justin is on a special prescription. I am on regular Medicare. I am not on Medicare Advantage. That's a whole nother discussion, but Justin is on regular Medicare. So number one, it provides a safety net as you age and quit working and need additional health insurance besides Nebraska Medicaid for your adult child. And it makes it Medicare, Medicaid, so you have secondary insurance already taken care of. I always want to include this because I am going to tell you, when you call Social Security, you're going to get a lot of different answers. So I included this. Here is the source. It's page 12 of this publication. It says that Medicare is for people 65 or older, or people with disabilities who have been getting SSDI for at least 2 years. Okay? So this is your proof. If you call Social Security and they say, oh no, we don't do that, and you can say, oh yes, look at this publication on this page, and it will tell you this. I've had to do this many times with both Social Security and Nebraska Medicaid. So what does this look like? Okay, this is an example. Those of you who have adult children working know that when they work every month, you have to report their earnings. So 943 right here. This is the 2024 SSI maximum amount, 943. So now I'm going to move down here. This individual has been working, has qualified for SSDI. On his own record, he is entitled to $588 of SSDI a month. Of course, then we go through this formula and you take off 20. So his SSDI, they're going to count $568 of it. He reported earnings for the month of $161.83. You subtract $65, they'll give him a whole $65 per month, and then they take half of it. So the addition of the 568 and the 4841 equals the 616.41. So if you, if you go back up here, here's the 616, here's this. So what they're saying then is we're only going to pay you an additional SSI payment of $326.59. So here's the $588 he gets off his own record, plus this is SSDI, the $326.59 is SSI. This is the total Social Security the individual gets per month. Notice he doesn't get $943 because he works, but with this individual's wages, he then gets $1,076.42. Now, I will tell you that I don't have time to go into a lot of detail about this, but if anyone has questions about Social Security, I want you to reach out to me, because Social Security is, oh wow, it's really a lot. But this is how a partial SSDI down here plus a partial SSI works and how it is calculated. Now, the third way that an individual can get SSDI is based upon a parent's record. Here again, this is a must-read, this publication. They can get up to 50% of the parent's Social Security. So let's say a parent was receiving $3,000 in Social Security, and they have a son or daughter on SSI. That individual would then start receiving $1,500. It's not adjusted. They get the whole $1,500. We're going to talk about family benefits here. When I presented this to the Down Syndrome Alliance of the Midlands, we were stuck on this page for probably 45 minutes. Every parent that spoke up was told something different by Social Security. Some parents were told, well, okay, on the maximum earner, so if you have the main breadwinner that gets $3,000, only the child with disabilities gets $1,500. Some were told that both the spouse and the child get $1,500. Some were told it was only the spouse. People then called Social Security in the next couple of days after the presentation. They were told different amounts. They were told different stories than what they were originally told. Why is it so complicated? If you click on this form, this SSA formula for Family Max, or Understanding the Social Security Maximum, this 13-page PDF, I'm an accountant. I can't even figure this out. It is so complicated. But what I can tell you is that there is a Family Max, and it appears to be 150 to 180% of the highest earner's benefit. So again, let's say the highest earner is $3,000. The child with a disability gets $1,500. That puts you at 150%. Maybe the spouse then gets an additional 30% off of the highest earner. But it's very complicated. And I'm going to go to this page. Fiddlesticks. Again, I am putting this information in here. If you're calling Social Security, your child now becomes a DAC, a disabled adult child. And how they get this child's benefit is that a parent has to be receiving Social Security retirement or disability benefits. My son Justin actually got this, he got it in before he qualified on his own record, because his father was declared disabled. And so Justin started getting half of his Social Security benefits clear back in 2012, 2013. And so again, I am including this to empower you if you're talking to Social Security and they tell you that your child's not a DAC, well, they are if one of the parents is getting retirement or disability benefits, and they get the higher of the two amounts. Okay, SGA. I believe that this is why my son was audited. They were trying to see if he ever made more than $1,550 a month. Unfortunately, when you are on SSDI, I still have to go in and report my son's wages every month. And to my knowledge, I will for the rest of his life. Now, there might be some people who tell you at Social Security you don't have to do that anymore. Easter Seals and now myself are saying, oh, I think you should do this because you don't want to go through these audits. And this SGA is adjusted every year based upon the average wage index. But this is something you have to be very careful of. Now, there are other options as far as getting, there are other options. You know, many of our young adults can maybe work 40 hours a week and they're not going to worry about this 1550 anymore, but they also would not get Social Security. It gets very complex. Usually a DAC recipient is assigned a specific Nebraska Medicaid worker, but this is where I have a lot of issues. Again, a number of families have contacted me that they have been kicked off of Nebraska Medicaid because their child is now getting more than the $943 of Social Security income. An example I can use, I'll use my own son. His Social Security payments it's all on the same day, but two separate deposits. So let's use the $3,000 again, and half of that is $1,500. My son only qualifies based upon his earnings for $647 a month. So the difference between that and $1,500, Nebraska Medicaid cannot count. They can only count the $647. They cannot count the $1,500 as a resource. And again, if your child gets kicked off in Nebraska Medicaid because they're getting more Social Security, reach out to me. I've got this down pat, who you need to call and how you need to get rid of this. They absolutely cannot do that. They cannot kick you off. You're getting that much Social Security because it is a child's benefit off of the parent's record. Now, unfortunately, the wages still must be reported. However, the SSDI amounts are not reduced by earned income. So I'm going to go back here to this SSI, SSDI combo. So right here, let's use the 1,500. Well, I don't even get these statements. I report Justin's earnings, but he gets the $1,500 every month, and it's the same amount every month. Those of you who are your child still on SSI, you know what a pain it is because it goes up and down every month based upon their earnings. But Justin's Social Security, it is determined as of January 1st, and it stays the same. So his Social Security is not decreased here. Like this individual is only getting $914.59 versus $943 because they're working. But I still have to report his wages. So this is a tough area. And every parent I talk to, it seems like they're told different things. Do we have any questions on this? And I don't know, I'm not necessarily qualified to answer them, but I can usually tell you who to call or who to ask. So any questions, Jen, on this? This is the most confusing part of this presentation.
Yes, we did get a comment saying thank you so much for this information. It is very confusing to try and work through. So thank
Yeah.
you.
And whoever that was, and I'm very serious, if you live in the Omaha area, I go to people's houses and I sit down with them while they call Social Security. I sit and listen. They tell Social Security, I have an advocate here with me. I will come to your house and help you work through this. I have helped people organize their Social Security papers. I have helped many people fight Nebraska Medicaid for kicking their child off because their child is now a DAC. The only reason they're getting that higher Social Security is because it's off the parent's record. So at the very end, again, is all my contact information. Anyone can call me. There's no charge. I just do this because I care about our disability community, and it really just torques me off when people are disallowed services that they're entitled to. Guardianship, power of attorney, conservatorship. I am guessing that everyone on this has probably already taken care of this. You have a child over the age of 19. Just some basic information here. What I do want to say, though, is that it is every family's decision what they want to do. I chose guardianship. My 2 children agreed. Justin's roommate, who also has Down syndrome, his parents chose power of attorney. That's what they chose, and it's working for them. Maybe your child does not need a guardian, but maybe they might need some extra help. And maybe that's why you kind of want someone like an appointee, just someone, a family friend or someone to help them. So this is right here, this standby guardian. You have to go through the court system to do this. Unfortunately, you do have to hire a lawyer. I couldn't do this myself. It's a pretty simple form, but I had to go through a lawyer, so I had to pay more money for it. But I was just glad I have this all set up, that my daughter is this. Or you can have a testamentary guardian, which is the replacement guardian named in your will. So in the parent's will, you can name who you want. This is some more information. When your adult child dies, the court must be notified within 10 days. That was something I learned as I was going through this. So this section is very short. It's just, you need to have something, and whatever works for your family. And don't let anyone, I guess, ridicule you or make you feel guilty about what you did. Every family has to make what is best, because you know your adult child the best. So, any questions on that? Just very briefly, I just wanted to bring up guardianship, power of attorney, making sure a conservator, whatever you feel is best. And again, those are all 1.5 to 2 hour seminars from other people, a whole lot smarter than me, but I bring it up because it is something that does need to talk about. Maybe you have your adult child has been their own guardian, but maybe as you look to the future, you might want a conservator to help with finances. So those are things to think about as you are planning for your dad now what. Jen, any questions?
Nope, no questions at this time.
Okay. The last one, housing. Where is your adult child going to live when you are dead? Okay. I think everyone knows your adult child just doesn't move out. I mean, it's just not that simple without involvement. I have noted here that residential services are in a flux right now and unpredictable because of all these changes in how the waivers are going to be used, what's going to be available, how the comprehensive waiver, at least initially what we have been told by Tony Green, will no longer be given to anyone. So let's talk about some different items, things that you can do. The continuous home, which is like a group home, is provided by a service provider. In the past, you had to have a comprehensive waiver in order to get this service. Many service providers are moving away from this model because they can't get 24-hour staff. We have such a shortage of direct service professionals in the state. So this is not very common. What most service providers are moving toward is a host home where they live in the home of an agency provider employee or a shared living provider. Again, in the past, both of these were paid for by the CDD, the comprehensive waiver. I call it the Cadillac. Those of us who are old, I see a couple names on here that I know they're old. I waited 7 years and 7 days exactly for Justin to get the comprehensive waiver, and I remember that I cried when my service coordinator finally called me and told me he had gotten that waiver, because my son was already living in his apartment and I was using some inheritance money to help supplement him living and achieving his dream of living in an apartment. So how all this is going to work in the future, I do not know. And I'm not 100% for sure DHHS really knows yet either. There's not a lot of detail coming out about how all this is going to be funded and how everything is going to look. Some other options are a market rate apartment, which my son has lived in for over 10 years. Parents can private pay to help in the apartment. My son was first on the DDAD waiver and then on the CDD waiver, so he was getting help in his apartment. I use what's called an independent provider who works with my son 25 to 30 hours a week to help him live independently in a market rate apartment. You might decide, I know of many families where the adult is going to go live with another sibling or a family member. You don't necessarily need a waiver for that, but I think for the sibling or family member who's taking care of the young adult, that it would be very nice to at least have the day waiver. And the young adult needs to have their own friends and to be with their own friends and have meaningful inclusion during the day. Sheltering Tree is something very new. Sheltering Tree builds apartment complexes, usually 22 units in an apartment building. It is for individuals who, with some amenities and with their providers, they have direct support professionals working with them. Sheltering Tree is not a service provider. They build apartments. Adult children who live there still use their direct support professionals to help them with daily living. Low-income housing. I can tell you in my travels across the state, low-income housing was huge in many smaller communities. Broken Bow. I surveyed a number of individuals who lived in low-income housing in Broken Bow, and they were all kind of in a cluster, so they had community, but they each had their own low-income housing. So that might be another option. But whatever you choose, it's your choice. If you think it is best for your adult child to go live with a sibling and everyone agrees and that's what the adult sibling wants to do, then do it. Everyone needs to make their own choice. And this is the end of the last 6 items that I have talked about that I want you to think about. Probably the biggest one that is work for you would be the second section on the paperwork of gathering some of the information in whatever form you want, whether it's on the internet, in a shared program. Like I said, I'm real big on 3-ring binders. I have one, like this one is, Justin's info, do not destroy. This has his last IEP in it, his last MDT in it. It has his report when he was born certifying that he does have Down syndrome. I have a binder on Social Security, a binder on Nebraska Medicaid, a binder on Representative Payee, a binder on Justin's funeral, etc. So I just want to close with this. I'm sure, let's see, what time is it? It's been an hour and a half. And all of you have been sitting here thinking, Kim, you are nuts. You are flipping nuts. There is no way I can do all this. I don't have time. But I think you're in control. And I cannot encourage you enough, especially if you're older. I'm 68. If you are in your 60s or 70s or 80s, this is just an absolute must. An absolute must. You know, these 8 of the 10 funerals that I went to were people less than 76 years old. And hey, when I'm 68, that's pretty close to my age, you know that? And again, only 2 of the deaths were expected. Most of them were completely unexpected. So I encourage you to just start. And where do you start? This is just my suggestion. You do whatever you want. First of all, identify that person. Who is going to be taking care of your adult child? I think the second thing is recording their if your adult child works, recording their ages. And I will tell you this, it would have been easier, and it still would be easier, if I just let Justin sit at home all day and watch TV versus working and taking, or maybe having him volunteer. I wouldn't let him probably sit and watch TV all day, but working, there's just all these rules, all these regulations, and it is so very difficult. The other thing I would just recommend is writing down the health information. Remember, just get those business cards every time you go to the doctor, staple them to a piece of paper, and put them in a sleeve, put it in a 3-ring notebook. Lawyer information, and just work on the other items as you have time. I've tried to give you some tools of things, to do, of things to think about, information to collect. And like I said, I feel very strongly about this. Anyone. And I see all of my parent resource coordinators on here, all my friends that I used to share a small office at in the old MMI with 6 of us in a room probably smaller than my genealogy room here that I'm talking out of. Anyone can give my name out to anyone, or my phone number. I get texts and phone messages all the time. So-and-so told me about you. Can you help me with this? I will tell you, there is absolutely no one, and I mean no one, that knows all the answers. Even Tony Green doesn't know all the answers in Nebraska DHHS. There is no one that knows all the answers. But what I will tell you, if you are involved in a strong parent network, parents, in my experience, in my 35 years, parents know more than anyone with a bunch of initials after their name. Our initials are mom or dad. And you're going to find out more from other parents than you will any professional. And other parents will also tell you conflicting information that you can go back and call Social Security or your service coordinator in Nebraska Medicaid and say, hey, what about this? I was told this. What is the correct answer? So anyway, additional questions. Jen, do we have any? I see there's some comments in the chat.
Yes, I am not sure if you're keeping an eye on the chat, but just lots of thanks for sharing your knowledge and all of your experiences. Also, we did have one question about housing, and it says wards can't sign contracts. Do you see this as a protection?
I'm sorry, could you read that question to me again, Jen?
Sure. Wards, people who have guardianship, they cannot sign the contracts. Do
That
you
is
see this
correct.
as a protection?
I do see it as a protection. So my son and his best friend have lived 10 years and 8 months in a market rate apartment, a typical apartment. This is not a group home. They they're by themselves from 4 o'clock in the afternoon to 8 o'clock the next morning. It's just a regular apartment. And Justin cannot sign his contract at all because I am his guardian. However, his roommate, his mom has power of attorney over financial, and she signs for her son. And so, um, yes, I do feel it is a good protection. And, man, there's lots of meetings you can attend on the difference between power of attorney and guardianship. Again, I just feel it's a very personal family, and my family, many of Justin's friends just have power of attorneys. Their parents just have power of attorneys. I went with the guardianship route because I knew I was going to be a single parent after my divorce, and I needed to be able to make decisions on Justin. If I was going to do all the work, I was going to make all the decisions. Um, I see one here. I would love to know more from you. Please reach out. Hey, I'll meet anyone anywhere. Um, I don't drink coffee. I drink Diet Dr. Pepper, but there's lots of places I can meet you at. I can meet you at Panera or something else. You can call me up. You can pick my brain. Again, I do not know all of the answers. And if any of you on here see anything in this presentation that you feel is incorrect, please let me know, because I had to change the whole Social Security part because nobody could get the same answer. Um, and I got to call Social Security next week because since Justin's father did pass away and we just had that funeral, I got to call him. So I think I'm going to call him a couple times here on different days and see if I get told the same thing about what Justin's earnings will be and how that will be going forward. And just so you know, I will also immediately have to report that to Nebraska Medicaid that Justin's Social Security is changing. But again, no matter what it changes to for this year, only $647 is based upon Justin's record. And they cannot consider the rest of his Social Security as part of his income. So, anything else? Oh, okay, the waiver. How to get on the home and community-based waivers. Jan, do you have any suggestions? They've been on the waiting list for 6 years.
Yes, I actually messaged her and asked a few more questions, and then so I think we're going to get in contact. She emailed me, so we're going to get in contact and try and work
Okay,
through that a
good.
little bit more. Yeah.
Yeah, because it's really, there hasn't been a lot of details about what's going to be happening. So,
Yes,
there's
it's
a lot
all
of promise.
changing.
There's a lot of promises, right, Jen? There's a lot of promises on what's going to be happening, but there's no additional money. So the accountant in me says, how do 2,700 people get services with no additional funding? But that's just me.
Yeah.
Anything
So
else?
again, feel free to reach out to Kim. Her contact information is there. My contact information, you should have it with the registration for tonight. Otherwise, I will be sending up that follow-up email. And again, Kim, thank you so much. You are just the best. We all adore you. And we thank you so much for sharing all of your information that you've gathered throughout the years. We really appreciate it.